Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. More on that later.
No, it's a cute photo of us.
Oh, not on Facebook.
What?
Yeah, no, I'm not on any social media.
In today's digital age, technology, the internet, and social media are amazing resources for socializing, learning, business, and entertainment. All benefits we're experiencing right now. However, excessive screen time is creating a health crisis, especially for the younger generations born into it. On average, Americans spend 4 to 5 hours a day on their phones, with nearly half of that on social media. Amongst youth, it's even higher, with 5 to 7 hours spent daily. And 1/3 of the 95% of teens using social media do it almost constantly. But that's just the phone. On average, adults in the US spend more than 13 hours a day if you include laptops, tablets, televisions, and gaming devices. And it's affecting both mental and physical well-being in a harmful, self-reinforcing cycle. Screen time is shrinking our attention spans, and social media companies are amplifying this by designing their platforms to keep us hooked. Mood disorders are on the rise, largely because social media hijacks the brain's pleasure and motivation systems, creating brain chemistry similar to addiction.
If we were to look at ourselves through the lens of an experiment, like we would an animal experiment, we think that animal is sick.
Not to mention the often overlooked health effects on the body. Posture, for one. Who can say, my back hurts? Not only do we mostly use technology sitting down, but it makes everything so accessible we barely need to move at all. This leads to inactivity, one of the largest contributors to preventable diseases and early death. To top it all off, it messes with our sleep, which is crucial for resetting the body for the next day. I'm orthopedic surgeon Dr. Chris Raynor, and today we'll explore how our bodies respond to becoming overly reliant on our devices. Oh, so sorry. On the Dr. Chris channel, we strive to teach all of you interns about human anatomy in an engaging manner. But when you are not watching my videos, there are other fantastic ways to learn about science and math, like the sponsor of this video, Brilliant. Brilliant is an online education service dedicated to teaching you about science, technology, engineering, and math in a fun and engaging, interactive manner. And it is one of the most effective ways to learn about these topics. Math was always a weak spot for me, and with lessons covering all types of math at a variety of levels, whether it's algebra, geometry, or calculus, Brilliant can help you to understand how to use math to solve everyday problems in business and in everyday life. And with lessons available on your desktop or on your mobile device, you can learn at any time, no matter where you are, making it easy to establish a daily learning habit. With engaging lessons crafted by teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, among others, you have access to an award-winning content that uses a unique first principles approach to effectively develop critical thinking skills. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days and get 20% off an annual premium subscription, visit brilliant.org/Dr. Chris Raynor or scan the QR code on the screen. The link is also in the description. Balance is key in life, and when the time spent in our online and natural worlds are out of sync, our natural bodies struggle to keep up. Additionally, these devices encourage endless consumption. It's all input, input, input with little physical output or engagement. Who has ever gotten a headache from using their cell phone? Brain fog, anyone? The sheer speed at which things happens is a recipe for overstimulation and digital overload, bro.
It basically means that we are having an excessive amount of input, so much input into our senses that we can't manage it. And it looks like extreme emotional or physical discomfort or both.
Irritability, anger, anxiety, sadness, mood swings, lack of focus, difficulty sleeping, etc. And this can overwhelm or bleed into other areas of your life, like work and relationships. Kind of like when the computer gets hot when you have too many tabs open. Oh, don't look at my computer. Your body literally gets burnt out. There's just too much info, you can't process it all, and you shut down.
We all have what they call a window of tolerance for managing our lives in whatever stress is happening or situations.
She notes that everyone's threshold is different, but the number one trigger is social media, especially when combined with other daily stressors. It's important to recognize overstimulation, particularly in kids, before we label people with negative personality traits or disorders. Ultimately, it's about self-care, slowing down and simplifying. When we can empty or clear the mind, we leave room open for new ideas. If we're constantly filling it with stimuli and running away from boredom, we may unintentionally stifle our ability to innovate. We need a chance to let our minds explore, to daydream.
Living in a society where we have the entire world of entertainment on our fingertips has led to our immediate dissatisfaction with even seconds of boredom.
We become so accustomed to the chaos that the quiet, meditative stillness feels unbearable. However, this simplicity is actually beneficial for our mental health.
When in the default mode, your mind gets the chance to connect to different ideas, try and solve some of your most pressing problems, and even create personal narratives or set goals.
It's when our brain taps into the subconscious to work things out. In a 2017 Georgia Tech study led by Christine Godwin, researchers measured the brain patterns of over 100 participants in an MRI and found that certain brain regions work together during an awake resting state. Turns out, frequent daydreaming is linked to higher intellectual and creative ability and more efficient brain function.
Those people almost certainly have untapped creativity, untapped resources within them that they don't yet know about because they're essentially using that energy elsewhere.
How can we tap into this potential if we're constantly filling our brains with mindless, attention-grabbing entertainment?
It's a way for some people of essentially putting a screen over that like gaping void. And it just makes it bearable enough.
But as computer science professor Cal Newport points out, if you just rip it out, you'll see the void, which is why people who successfully detox from social media are the ones who aggressively pursue alternatives, like hobbies or learning new skills.
I got the whole kit. Top hat, magic wand, rings, scarves, trick cards, real cards, white rabbits, white doves.
How long have you been doing magic?
Start tomorrow. It's a New Year's resolution.
However, many people in today's digital age struggle to stay on task, a difficulty only worsened by excessive screen time. That's right, our attention spans are shrinking. Attention is key to daily life and self-direction, and can be either voluntary or involuntary. It's closely tied to memory, involving brain regions like parietal, temporal, and frontal areas. Damage to these networks can cause significant attention deficits. They can also adapt based on experiences, even small ones like using a touchscreen. Yep. Attention changes and can be trained, and therefore untrained as well.
In 2000, the average attention span was 12 seconds, and only 15 years later, it shrank down to 8.2 seconds. Social media created an attention span crisis.
Attention is a precious mental resource that we must prioritize and use wisely. Psychologist Gloria Mark emphasizes the importance of breaks. They replenish our energy and boost our attentional capacity, making us more productive. Unfortunately, many of our lifestyles and work environments discourage meaningful breaks. Instead, we fill them with more media usage, sometimes even combining multiple sources and mistakenly calling it downtime. Media multitasking is often involuntary. Research shows this leads to worse performance on tasks that require focus and attention. People underestimate the cost of task switching. People make more mistakes multitasking because every time we task switch, it takes energy to reorient ourselves.
Your brain has to switch from task to task, creating the switch cost effect, making it harder for you to concentrate.
This happens within our phone usage, but also as we transition from our phone to a real life activity, and even between real life activities.
Normally you walk from one room to another or from a field into the trees, but now you can get 10,000 context switches in that 30 minutes of scrolling on Instagram or TikTok.
And so, navigating our modern world, we rarely give ourselves the opportunity to even maintain, let alone train, our attention. Research shows a strong link between ADHD and internet use disorder, stating that people with ADHD are more likely to develop internet addiction, mainly due to their inattention. Basically, their brains have differences that make it harder to control impulses. While ADHD is traditionally diagnosed based on lifelong symptomatology, it's becoming more common for people to self-diagnose after seeing relatable content online.
This is your brain, and this is your brain on ADHD.
And with Adderall becoming easier to get, even without a prescription, it is also becoming easier for those people to then self-treat themselves as well.
Now, they may have clinically diagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but a lot of what people think is ADHD, it turns out, is people just over-consuming dopamine from various sources.
We'll dive into dopamine shortly, but for now, understand that our technology-filled lifestyles aren't helping our attention, which is especially concerning for those young people whose brains aren't fully mature. Their prefrontal cortex, which governs executive functions like decision-making and prioritizing attention, is still developing.
Adolescence and childhood are a critical stage in brain development, and that young people are more at risk when they're spending too much time on social media.
Not only are underdeveloped brains making more important decisions online, but we also risk reinforcing neural pathways that can persist into adulthood. Remember, what fires together wires together. So if unhealthy neural pathways are being established young, it sets the children up for future issues. And it turns out excessive screen use can trigger pathways comparable to addiction by stimulating our dopamine reward centers.
You learn behaviors when you get a reward without a cue. You keep behaviors when you anticipate a reward and it gets satisfied. And you change a behavior when you anticipate a good reward, but it's worse than expected, so you don't want to do it again.
The evolutionary purpose of our dopamine system is to reinforce beneficial behaviors. However, because we can't predict what's on our phone and we're almost always rewarded with minimal effort, we're increasingly driven to check it, which on average we do 144 times a day. So not only does our dopamine system help us develop the habit of picking up our phone, but tech companies have studied and hijacked this system to keep us on it as well. Former Facebook president Sean Parker called it a social validation feedback loop and admitted that the like button was deliberately designed to give a dopamine hit to encourage continued use.
Every ding notification acts as a mini reward that you now associate with picking up your phone.
Social media companies prey on something we all want: connection. Stanford's medical director of addiction medicine, Ann Lemke, explains.
Well, social media has essentially taken human connection and turned it into a drug by distilling it down to the essential properties that make something addictive.
Social media likes, escapism, and pleasing visuals trigger the brain's reward system, providing an easy dopamine release. And this excessive stimulation creates neural pathways similar to those formed by drugs or alcohol. Except we have 24/7 access to this drug, so reinforcement of instant gratification is just a click away. However, dopamine is not just about pleasure or reward itself, but the build-up to the reward.
It's novel. Remember, dopamine is about novelty, surprise, and the sense that we are on some exciting track. That's what dopamine is really about. It puts us into states of readiness, anticipation, looking, seeking, etc., almost always for things outside the confines of our skin.
It's the anticipation of reward itself that keeps us engaged and motivated to keep looking for the next hit.
Algorithms try to show as much content in as little time as possible. And as a result, our interaction with social media became much faster.
Good point from fellow YouTuber Sincerely. Social media platforms aim to keep our dopamine system active by pushing shorter content. However, what starts off dopamine driven and exciting can quickly turn into something like OCD. As Huberman points out, even when the novelty fades, the brain continues to seek that next dopamine hit, leading to doom scrolling.
We can define an obsessive compulsive behavior where the obsession leads to a compulsion. So the obsession is a thought, the compulsion is a behavior, but the acting out of the compulsion merely serves to increase the obsession.
He explains that, unlike obsessions with cleanliness or food, there's no relief from anxiety by carrying out the compulsion. You keep going because the anticipation of something exciting remains, even if the content no longer satisfies you. But occasionally, you do get an unexpected reward. And again, social media platforms design it this way deliberately.
The algorithms that they've incorporated function on the most powerful way to keep people doing a behavior, or an animal for that matter, is intermittent random reward, or random intermittent reward.
He compares it to gambling.
That you don't know when you're going to hit the jackpot.
And when you do, you're like, woohoo, buddy! And your brain starts to crave the next hit.
Relicanth.
Bro.
GP.
Holy. Overall, dopamine drives the search for rewards and helps us overcome challenges to earn them. But if we're just sitting and consuming endless pleasures with no challenges to overcome, it can start working against us.
What you end up with is somebody that feels really unmotivated, and those pleasures no longer work to tickle those feel-good circuits, and so there's no reason for them to go out and pursuing them.
We become apathetic. If you notice this, consider trying a dopamine fast. Become aware of 3 C's, as Dr. Lemke says.
If we're using it in an out of control way, if we're using it in an automatic, compulsive way that we can't stop even when we want to, and if we're having consequences as a result of our use.
I know we debate about gateway drugs like weed, but cross-addiction with excessive internet use is something to consider. If someone develops addictive circuitry, often influenced by early experiences, or genetic predispositions, they might be more susceptible to developing an addictive personality. So the brain can tell different types of rewards apart, but someone with an established pattern of reward seeking may become addicted to various substances or behaviors, especially if they develop tolerance with their typical drug of choice. Hey, eventually those likes may not do it for you anymore. While discussing the cross addiction of alcohol and sex, psychotherapist and addiction specialist Dr. David Fawcett explains that the substances are really just used to numb underlying pain.
It's not directly related to their acting out, but it's certainly connected to their ability to manage the emotions that they may be experiencing that are uncomfortable and negative.
Whether it's peer pressure or the brain's lack of impulse control, what's clear is that excessive social media use doesn't set the brain up for success. Problematic internet use has also been linked to many mood disorders.
And my growing concern is that social media has become an important contributor to that youth mental health crisis.
Long-term consequences are hard to study since the kids growing up online are still relatively young, and while research typically notes correlation and not causation, they surely feed into each other. We're talking anxiety, depression, loneliness, dependency, and overall poor psychological well-being.
When you think, I'm feeling low, I don't feel good, nothing really feels like good, am I depressed? But maybe you've saturated the dopamine circuits, you're now in the pain part of things.
Everyone's always smiles on the high, but seems to forget how the pleasure-pain pendulum swings back to pain. How unhappy people feel has been shown to be directly linked to duration, frequency, and number of social media platforms being used. So again, excessive is the point here. Moderation is key. But it's hard to stay moderate when everything online is done in an excess.
And again, the issue is that the brain cannot distinguish between social media and real world. So what if the expectations you have to your life and yourself are not fulfilled on social media?
Social comparison happens when we define ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, feeling better by looking down on those worse off, and worse by looking up. Social media amplifies this grass is greener mentality. Studies show those with low self-esteem are especially affected by feedback and tend to then use social media even more as a coping mechanism.
If too few likes on photos are received, people reported to feel bad. Others started to feel unhappy as they were constantly exposed to the perfect life of others.
Social media seems to amplify distress in individuals with unhelpful thinking patterns, increasing vulnerability, particularly among teens, those with low popularity, and females. But it's hard to stop, even when it harms mental health. People experience FOMO both on and off social media. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't, because withdrawal itself also triggers FOMO, at least in the short term.
After 24 hours of quitting, and one survey found that people began to experience FOMO, which led to increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, and more anxiety.
When habitual dopamine stimulation is removed, the body responds with increased cortisol, triggering confusion. What's going on? Where's my fix? Phantom phone syndrome can even set in.
Hold on, I'm buzzing. Got me again.
Symptoms may last for weeks, since it takes about 3 weeks to form a new habit. This restlessness happens because for so long, our bodies have been conditioned, not just by dopamine, but by other physiological reactions as well. This is tied to our propensity towards negativity and sensationalism online. Why do we gravitate towards content that gets us riled up? Watching emotionally charged material online triggers physiological responses, such as increased heart rate, changes in blood flow like blushing or turning pale, sweating, and digestive changes. The James Lange theory suggests that physiological arousal is the primary cause of emotions, with the brain interpreting bodily responses in order to experience emotions such as fear or excitement. It's like the body says, hey, this is happening, and the brain, follows suit. Research on sensation seeking and arousal suggests that new experiences are more likely to physiologically arouse us. Similarly, studies on sensationalism show that people tend to enjoy situations more when they are emotionally aroused and they're more memorable. As a result, people are more likely to repeat actions that make them feel something.
You're not having sex because you're too busy online trying to get likes.
So we like being turned on, so to speak, though we're not too picky as to why.
You know how your parents got likes? By f***ing people, yeah.
Sensation seeking is actually a personality trait that refers to thrill-seeking risk takers. As Dr. Kenneth Carter, a professor of psychology, explains in his TED Talk, For the Thrill of It, there's something interesting about these people.
People with high sensation-seeking personalities have lower levels of stress hormones like cortisol, but at the same time, they produce more dopamine.
Seems like habitual thrill seekers are in a feedback loop. The more they seek thrilling experiences, the better they get at managing stress and enjoying the dopamine rush, leading them to seek even more excitement. For most people, though, consuming emotionally charged content on TV or online serves as a substitute for real-life thrill seeking. Because they get emotional arousal without facing actual stressors, they don't get the relief of overcoming them and never have the chance to train their cortisol response.
Well, I really like the cooking videos that you guys are serving up to me. I really like the cat videos as well. They're very cute.
Right, I'll inform the algorithm.
Instead, the stress builds up insidiously as low-level chronic stress, which can lead to long-term health issues, even if it's not immediately noticeable.
So I told the algorithm that I liked all of those things, but whenever I load up TikTok, it only serves me up sexy dancing ladies.
Whether it's driven by a need for stimulation, like an addiction to processed foods, or the social validation of shared emotional experiences, you know, misery loves company, the result is that mainstream media is often dominated by negativity.
Yes, algorithm up the percentage of sexy dancing ladies. He f***ing loves them.
Even young people are noticing the damaging effects of what some consider negligent media coverage. There may be lots of exposure to horrific events in terms of quantity. The coverage often lacks depth and is quickly passed over without proper processing or understanding.
We reach out, and then the news drags our attention to something else. We move on, and this goes on and leads to normalization.
Desensitization happens when repeated exposure diminishes our emotional response, similar to how thrill seekers habituate to stress.
You will start to experience compassion fatigue and grow indifferent to the suffering of others. We become psychologically numb when exposed to a plethora of trauma and violence. It's a defense mechanism.
Detachment plays a huge role in why people can get really mean online. There's a lack of immediate consequences and a diminished sense of empathy. Empathy can vary based on factors like pain intensity, gender, with women typically showing more empathy, and proximity, how relevant the situation is to our own lives, but also like literal closeness. Bottom-up processing relies on direct emotional cues and physical presence, often missed in online interactions. Without immediate emotional feedback, empathy is reduced, making it easier for people to behave negatively and cyberbully, as they may not fully understand the emotional impact of their actions on others.
As humans, we naturally gravitate towards each other. We're social beings, and yet the new norm is to disregard others.
Take it from the teens immersed in the online world themselves, like Maggie Trail. She describes the invisible wall, which reinforces poor socialization habits. Connecting online is easier, so we avoid awkward but necessary interactions, leading to less practice in face-to-face communication. And ultimately, we gravitate more toward online spaces.
So Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook, he's not on anything?
Well, how does he send you a dick pic?
However, when everyone is hypercritical online, we develop a warped view of others and at the same time become a distorted version of ourselves.
He doesn't. I've only ever seen his dick in person.
Oh my God.
Stats vary and self-reports of cyberbullying can be biased, but cybersecurity experts at Avast say nearly 1/2 of US teens have experienced some form of it. In response, some consider quitting school, leaving the internet, or self-harm. Is the internet giving us too much time to stew in negativity?
We get stuck in a group depending on which extremes we gravitate towards and become disconnected from others with different views.
Algorithms create echo chambers that amplify divisiveness, especially during elections. By reinforcing existing beliefs and limiting exposure to diverse perspectives, they hinder personal growth and promote narrow-minded thinking.
You know when you have an opinion on something, how do you voice it?
Just tell it to the nearest person.
Conflict is never good for health, and in a world where we have to live together, we must try to understand and care for each other. All the mental exhaustion from constant screen time takes a toll on us, making it harder to care for our physical well-being, as seen in depression, where self-care is neglected. Similarly, too much screen time can directly impact the body, feeding into a negative cycle that harms both mind and body. I'll start with less extreme examples, like hand strain.
This increase in size of the nerve from using your phone means that you have a higher risk of getting carpal tunnel syndrome, which is defined by numbness, tingling, and weakness in your hand.
Text claw occurs when the median nerve running from the shoulder to the fingers becomes compressed, increasing the risk of carpal tunnel syndrome. Then there's tech neck, chronic pain from poor posture while using devices. Looking down constantly strains neck muscles and causes the shoulders to slump forward. Poor posture can also cause spinal issues like disc compression and in turn, premature degeneration of the discs. Which leads me to my next point. Excessive screen time promotes a sedentary lifestyle, sitting for prolonged periods of time. Humans are built to stand upright. Sitting too much puts significant stress on our spinal structure and other joints. It leads to overall deconditioning, muscle fatigue, hip flexor shortening, and weakened core and glute muscles, a condition called gluteal amnesia. But movement has always been a constant part of human life and is essential for our health. Although there is much that we disagree on, chiropractor Eric Berg and I can agree on this. Motion equals life and no motion equals death.
Exercise in general increases your capacity to handle more life stress.
And it strengthens our body's resilience by enhancing DNA repair mechanisms, helping maintain genomic stability. Exercise also boosts your mood, baby.
In fact, there's a direct correlation with how much you move or how fast you move.
Physical inactivity is the fourth leading cause of death globally, responsible for 6% of all deaths, and is the leading cause of death from non-communicable diseases.
I found an interesting research paper that talks about inactivity as the primary cause for over 35 chronic illnesses.
If we don't move, we lose muscle and our metabolism gets thrown off, leading to issues like hypertension, high cholesterol, and blood sugar problems. Plus, sedentary activities like binging TV or internet browsing are passive stimulation and often don't engage the brain in constructive or challenging ways. And you have to keep it active in order to keep it healthy.
Every time you learn something new, you're building new synapses, you're building new neural connections.
Basically, with a redundancy of connections, you can dance around mental roadblocks. Physical inactivity is also linked to several cancers, though the exact reasons aren't fully understood. Excessive screen time not only promotes sedentary behavior, but also encourages us to overcomplicate our lives and health by constantly presenting us products and solutions we don't really need.
You look? Well, of course I looked. It right in my face.
With everything just a click away, it's easy to fall into the trap of consumerism and distractions. The general rule of thumb, keep your health routine simple. Move often, eat well, get quality sleep, and repeat.
And social media sucks.
Oh, but that's yet another thing screens have been sent to destroy. Sleep. Many consider proper sleep the key indicator of whether you'll have enough willpower to maintain other positive habits effectively. Not only does it replenish energy levels, but it restores and repairs the body, boosts immune function, helps regulate hormones, enhances physical performance, and aids in weight management. Clinical professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine, Dr. Dan Siegel, points out that on top of allowing active neurons to rest, Sleep does this.
The supportive cells, called glial cells, are now cleaning up the toxins that the neurons produce. And if you don't get from 7 to 9 hours of sleep, you just get 5, the toxins remain there for over 95% of people.
And if you don't clean up the garbage, it just piles up. Then we overload the next day. What a nightmare.
People are exposing their eyes to this stream of photons from these objects that basically tells your brain, stay awake, it's not time to go to sleep yet.
Just what we need before sleep, a big cup of metaphorical coffee.
It makes your attention falter, your memory is impaired, your ability to think through problems is challenged, your insulin even, that helps regulate your metabolism, turned upside down so you're more likely to gain weight.
Are you starting to see how this dangerous cycle often plays out? Both the physical and mental effects of sleep deprivation can make someone more self-conscious, more prone to comparing themselves to others, and more vulnerable to low mood. We then turn to more social media use to cope and search for validation, which increases screen time and worsens the body's effects. It's a feedback loop that compounds both physical and emotional exhaustion and stress. In summary, it's crucial to prioritize the natural needs of our mind and body while using technology. Here are some tips. Number 1, limit screen time. The recommendation is 2 hours or less for those under 18, though I recognize this may be tough. So try starting with more frequent breaks, preferably movement breaks. Number 2, when using devices, consider standing desks, a Bozu ball, or other ergonomic furniture to support your posture. And number 3, don't forget to get outside, even if you're bringing your device with you. Just spend some time in nature, man. As natural beings, we need to remember our connection to the world beyond the screen.
I saw that a girl I went to high school with, she posted that she's gonna be taking a break from social media. Have you guys seen people do this? Yeah, these like heroes of the internet.
Maintaining a healthy balance is key, and you'll know when it's tipping too far. Technology is meant to enhance connection and to access knowledge, not to pull you away from it.
Sarah, do you even know what he had for lunch today?
No! Never gonna know. Unless I ask him.
If you can't tag him, does he even exist?
If it's making us feel lazy, perpetually unsatisfied, negative, or draining our energy for creativity and activity, it's time to rethink how we interact with it. Remember, to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days and also score 20% off an annual subscription, visit brilliant.org/Dr. Chris Raynor or scan the QR code on screen. You can also click the link in the description. We are working towards a goal of 1 million subs, and we would love to have you with us when we get there. Don't forget to follow my gym, Human 2.0 Fitness, for free right here on YouTube, where we post content that helps you move better and prevent injury. Otherwise, as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho, where we see one, do one, teach one.